Have you ever had your mind go completely blank in the middle of a conversation? That sudden moment of panic when you feel like you have nothing to say. It feels uncomfortable, almost like you are being exposed. But the truth is, it is not just you, and it is not because you are boring. The real problem is something most people never notice. You do not have too few things to say. You actually have too many. Your brain is constantly generating thoughts, ideas, questions, and reactions. But most of them never make it out. They get filtered before you even speak. That filter is what creates the blank. Every time you think something is too random or not interesting enough, you shut it down. Every time you worry that the other person will not care, you block another idea. Over time, that filter becomes stronger and stronger. And the more you try to say the right thing, the fewer options your mind allows you to choose from. Imagine someone tells you they just came back from vacation. Instantly, your mind produces multiple responses. You could ask where they went. You could comment on how relaxed they look. You could connect it to your own travel experience. But then the filter steps in. One idea feels too shallow, another feels unimportant, and suddenly your mind goes blank. Understanding this changes how you see conversation. The issue is not a lack of ideas. It is an overload of filtering. And once you see that clearly, you begin to realize that the solution is not to think more, but to filter less. What if overthinking is the very thing ruining your conversations? What if the reason you keep going blank is not because you have nothing to say, but because you keep stopping yourself from saying what naturally comes to mind? That is the core of the stop overthinking principle. The idea is simple. Say what comes to mind within 3 seconds. After those first few seconds, your internal filter begins to take over. It starts judging, editing, rejecting, and second-guessing thoughts that were completely usable just a moment earlier. The longer you wait, the more likely you are to discard something that would have worked perfectly well in a real conversation. This does not mean saying reckless or inappropriate things. Your normal social awareness still exists. The point is not to remove judgment entirely. It is to stop over-managing every sentence as if casual conversation were some kind of high-stakes performance. Too many people treat small talk like an interview for a top-secret position, as if one average comment will somehow ruin the interaction. But in reality, the things you say without over-filtering are often the very things that make conversation feel natural. They are honest. They are unforced. They sound like a real person instead of a rehearsed version of one. If someone mentions they love dogs, your mind may immediately produce several possible responses. You might wonder what breed they like. You might think about your neighbor's dog that barks all night. You might remember a funny story from your childhood. The mistake is stopping to analyze which response is best. In many cases, any one of them could work. Even the comment about the barking dog could open up an entirely new direction, maybe a conversation about difficult neighbors, sleep, apartments, or city life. That is why this principle is so powerful. It gives you more material, not less. It removes the pressure to be clever and replaces it with a willingness to be present. The goal is not perfection, the goal is flow. If you think about the people you feel most comfortable talking to, you probably do not filter yourself much around them. That is why those conversations feel easy. The stop overthinking principle is about bringing more of that same freedom into everyday interactions. The single most powerful tool for never running out of things to say is not wit, confidence, or being naturally entertaining. It is curiosity. People who seem able to talk to anyone are usually not the most interesting people in the room. More often, they are the most interested. That difference matters. Genuine curiosity solves almost every conversation problem. When you are truly curious about the person in front of you, you stop obsessing over your own performance. Your attention shifts away from how you sound and toward what you are discovering. And the moment that shift happens, conversation anxiety starts to lose its grip. Curiosity gives you endless material because people are full of details, experiences, opinions, and stories. If you care enough to notice them, you will almost never run out of questions. More importantly, people respond well to curiosity because it feels good to be seen. It feels good when someone is not just waiting for their turn to speak, but is actually interested in what makes you different. The key, though, is that the curiosity has to be real. Forced interest is easy to sense. People can tell when they are being managed by a technique instead of engaged by a person. But when your interest is genuine, the conversation changes. It becomes less about filling silence and more about uncovering something meaningful. If someone mentions their job, do not stop at asking what they do. Go a little further. Ask what part of it is most challenging. Ask how they got into it. Ask what outsiders usually misunderstand about that kind of work. Questions like these are not difficult when curiosity is present. They appear naturally because you are following your interest instead of performing a script. In a world where so many people are focused on saying something impressive, the person who listens with sincere curiosity stands out immediately. People may not always remember your exact words, but they do remember how they felt while talking to you. And when someone feels interesting in your presence, they usually leave that conversation remembering you in a positive way. Great conversationalists are not people who always have something brilliant to say. More often, they are people who know how to keep a topic alive. And the simplest way to do that is through follow-up questions. The real skill is not talking more. It is listening carefully, identifying details, and then going one level deeper. Most people move on too quickly. They hear something, respond briefly, and then shift the topic because they feel pressure to keep the conversation going. But strong conversations do the opposite. They stay with a topic long enough to explore it. Follow-up questions make this easy because they are built directly from what the other person just said. You do not need to invent anything new. You only need to stay present. If someone tells you they just came back from Italy, the most basic response is asking how it was. But instead of stopping there, you can go further. You can ask which city they enjoyed the most. Then what made that place stand out? Then what specific moment made the trip memorable? Each question naturally builds on the previous answer. This creates depth without effort. The conversation begins to feel engaging because it is moving somewhere instead of jumping randomly between topics. Many people make the mistake of quickly turning the conversation back to themselves. They hear something and immediately relate it to their own experience. While that can be useful in moderation, doing it too early often cuts the other person off. It shortens the interaction instead of expanding it. Follow-up questions do the opposite. They give the other person space to share more, and in doing so, they take pressure off you. You do not need to carry the conversation alone. You simply guide it forward. We have all experienced conversations where someone asks a question and then immediately shifts focus back to themselves without exploring your answer. Those conversations feel shallow and one-sided. When you avoid that pattern and stay with the other person's topic a little longer, the entire interaction becomes more satisfying. Mastering follow-up questions turns conversation into something effortless. You stop searching for new topics because you realize that one topic, handled well, can lead to many layers of meaningful exchange. What if every single sentence someone says already contains multiple new directions for the conversation? Most people never notice this. They hear one idea and respond to it, missing all the other possibilities hidden inside the same sentence. That is where conversation threading comes in. Conversation threading is the ability to recognize that one response can lead to several different topics. Instead of seeing a single path forward, you begin to see multiple options at the same time. Imagine someone says they just came back from hiking in Colorado with their brother, but the weather was not great. In that one sentence, there are several threads. You could talk about hiking, about Colorado, about their relationship with their brother, about the weather, or about travel in general. Each of these is a valid direction. Most conversations stall because both people follow only one thread and ignore the rest. When that thread runs out, there is a pause, and neither person knows where to go next. But if you are aware of multiple threads, you always have somewhere to go. This creates a kind of safety in conversation. You are no longer dependent on a single topic. If one direction slows down, you can naturally shift to another without it feeling forced. Try paying attention to this the next time you talk to someone. Listen not just for what they are saying, but for all the possible directions within what they are saying. You will start to notice how many options are actually available. For example, if someone mentions they are working on a website project that is taking longer than expected because their client keeps changing things, you already have several threads. You could ask about the project itself, about the timeline, about the client, about how they deal with difficult situations, or about their work in general. When you begin to track these threads, the fear of running out of things to say starts to disappear. You realize that conversations do not end because there is nothing left to say. They end because the available paths were not noticed. Once you see those paths clearly, conversation starts to feel much more natural. Instead of searching for something new, you simply follow what is already there. The most engaging conversations are not just deep, and they are not just light. They are a balance of both. Like a good story, they move between moments of meaning and moments of ease. When that balance is missing, conversations start to feel either heavy or shallow. If everything stays on the surface, it may feel easy, but it lacks connection. If everything becomes too deep too quickly, it can create discomfort and tension. The skill is learning how to move between these two states naturally. Strong conversations often begin with lighter topics. This creates comfort and builds a sense of ease between people. Once that foundation exists, it becomes much easier to introduce deeper elements. And when a topic starts to feel too intense, shifting back to something lighter helps release that pressure. For example, after discussing challenges at work, which can be a deeper topic, you might transition into something more relaxed but still related. You could mention a funny or unusual situation connected to stress or daily routines. This keeps the conversation flowing while reducing intensity. The same works in the opposite direction. If the conversation begins with something light, like talking about a show or a hobby, you can gradually introduce a more thoughtful angle. You might ask whether those interests influence how someone sees the world or how they think about certain issues. This movement between depth and lightness creates rhythm, and that rhythm is what makes conversations feel alive. Many people lean too far in one direction. Some avoid depth completely because they fear making things uncomfortable. Others go too deep too quickly, creating a sense of pressure that the other person may not be ready for. When you learn to balance both, conversations become more memorable. They feel meaningful without becoming overwhelming. They feel enjoyable without becoming empty. The people we enjoy talking to most often are not just interesting. They know how to move between seriousness and ease in a way that feels natural. And that balance is what keeps others engaged. Even when you understand all these principles, there will still be moments when your mind goes blank. It happens to everyone. The difference is not whether it happens, but how you respond when it does. Most people panic in that moment. They feel pressure, they become self-aware, and that only makes the blank worse. But if you have a simple recovery strategy, the situation changes completely. Instead of freezing, you have a clear way to move forward. One of the easiest methods is to use your environment. When your mind feels empty, shift your attention to what is around you. You can comment on something simple in the space you are in. It could be the music playing, the atmosphere, the design of the place, or anything that feels natural in that moment. This works because it does not require creativity. You are not trying to invent something interesting. You are simply observing what is already there and turning it into conversation. Another effective approach is to return to something the other person mentioned earlier. In most conversations, people leave small details behind that can easily be revisited. By bringing one of those details back, you continue the conversation without needing to create a new topic from nothing. These strategies remove the fear of silence. You know that even if your mind goes blank, you are not stuck. You have a way to recover quickly and naturally. Everyone experiences these moments, even people who are very skilled at communication. The difference is that they do not see it as a problem. They see it as a normal part of interaction and trust that they can move past it. When you have recovery tools ready, you stop fearing the blank. And once that fear disappears, the blank itself becomes much less frequent. Every strong conversationalist has a set of reliable topics and questions they can fall back on when needed. It is not something obvious from the outside, but internally they have a kind of mental backup system. You can think of it as a conversation emergency kit. This kit is not about memorizing scripts. It is about having a few flexible directions that work in almost any situation. Topics like travel, food, entertainment, daily life, or future plans tend to be accessible to most people. They create openings without putting pressure on the other person. The key is choosing questions that are simple enough for anyone to answer, but open enough to lead somewhere interesting. Instead of asking what someone does in a very direct and closed way, you can ask what has been keeping them busy lately. Instead of asking if they have seen any good movies, you can ask what they have been watching that they would recommend. Questions like these invite a more personal response. They give the other person room to expand instead of just giving a short answer. Having a small set of these questions ready reduces anxiety. You no longer feel like you're relying entirely on improvisation. You know that if the conversation slows down, you have a way to restart it naturally. This does not make you less authentic. It actually gives you more freedom to be present. Because instead of worrying about what to say next, you trust that you have options available. Over time, these questions become second nature. You do not even think of them as tools anymore. They simply become part of how you communicate. And once you reach that point, the fear of running out of things to say begins to disappear. You realize that conversation is not about constant creativity. It is about having a few reliable ways to keep things moving. One of the fastest ways to move a conversation from surface level to something meaningful is through self-disclosure. When you share something real about yourself, even in a small way, it creates an opening for the other person to do the same. This works because of a simple human pattern. When someone shows a bit of openness, it signals safety. It makes the interaction feel more genuine. And naturally, the other person feels more comfortable matching that level of honesty. The key is not to share everything at once. It is to build gradually. Start with simple facts, then move into opinions, and eventually into feelings. This progression feels natural and avoids overwhelming the other person. For example, you might begin by mentioning where you are from. Then you could share how you feel about that place. And later you might reveal something more personal about what it meant to leave or stay. Each step adds depth without creating discomfort. Even small additions can change the tone of a conversation. Instead of just saying you enjoyed something, you can add why it mattered to you. Instead of giving a neutral response, you include a personal perspective. That extra layer turns an ordinary exchange into something more human. This is not about oversharing. It is about showing that there is a real person behind your words. When you do that, conversations begin to feel less like exchanges of information and more like moments of connection. In a world where many interactions stay at a surface level, the ability to share appropriately and invite others to do the same becomes a powerful skill. It creates depth where there would otherwise be none. And often it is these small moments of openness that people remember long after the conversation ends. Knowing how to end a conversation is just as important as knowing how to start or maintain one. Many people overlook this part, but the way a conversation ends often shapes the final impression more than anything else. A smooth and natural ending leaves both people feeling comfortable, while an awkward one can undo an otherwise good interaction. A strong ending usually has three simple elements. First, you acknowledge the value of the conversation. This shows appreciation and makes the other person feel that the time spent talking mattered. Second, you provide a genuine reason for leaving. This keeps the ending from feeling personal or abrupt. Third, you leave a small opening for future interaction, even if it is just a possibility. For example, instead of ending abruptly, you might express that you enjoyed hearing about something they shared, mention that you need to move on to something else, and then suggest staying in touch or continuing the conversation another time. This structure feels natural because it respects both people. It closes the interaction without cutting it off. Many conversations feel awkward at the end because they simply fade out or stop suddenly. There is hesitation, uncertainty, or a rushed exit that feels incomplete. Learning how to end clearly removes that discomfort. It is also important to remember that every conversation is meant to end at some point. Ending it well does not mean it failed. It means it reached a natural conclusion. When you are confident in ending conversations, you no longer feel pressure to keep them going longer than necessary. When you put all of these ideas together, a bigger picture becomes clear. Running out of things to say was never really the problem. The real issue was filtering too much, overthinking, and not knowing how to navigate the flow of conversation. Now you understand that your mind already produces enough ideas. You know how to reduce the filter, how to stay curious, how to ask follow-up questions, and how to find multiple directions in a single topic. You have strategies for recovering when your mind goes blank, ways to deepen connection through sharing, and a clear method for ending conversations smoothly. These are not just techniques. They change how you experience social interaction. Conversations stop feeling like something you have to perform. They become something you participate in. And when that shift happens, something else changes as well. You begin to feel more at ease, more confident, and more connected to the people around you. Because at its core, conversation is not about saying the perfect thing. It is about being present, paying attention, and allowing the interaction to unfold naturally.